Hello, my name is Jay Knight, the chairman and co-founder of GRLDC, the Georgia Residential Land Development Council. I'm here today to celebrate with you the passage of Senate Bill 447 and to discuss with you what you can expect, how to utilize Senate Bill 447 and when it goes into effect. Senator Dixon, thank you for being here today. And I just want to express our gratitude to you on behalf of the Georgia Residential Land Development Council and all Georgia home buyers, especially the home buyers, would-be home buyers are having it so hard to find an affordable home today. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Grateful to be here with you, Jay. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. So you and I met about a year ago, and to recap for the folks that are joining us today, and this is just the membership of Georgia Residential Land Development Council, just like to recap a little bit of the process before we dive right into the bill. Today is a celebration, of course, and we need to kind of define what we're celebrating. So we had started out about 15 months ago coming up with language for what was at the time House Bill 812. And I don't have any experience in the legislative realm where you are an expert. And at that time, I thought we were only working on House Bill 812, and Representative Mike Chokas sponsored that. And then as that was going through the House, what I didn't realize is that you had picked up, you saw the need, and you created Senate Bill 447. Can you tell me how that went from House Bill 812 to Senate Bill 447?
Absolutely, Jay. Yes. Really what happened, seeing the struggles in the House that they were having in committee, talked with some of the House members, and we do this quite often. We'll have companion bills is what we call them, and there'll be a Senate bill and a House bill, and we'll push them from both sides, and that is just basically you're kind of doubling down there, and typically when you're dealing with an issue, one chamber's more lenient to it or more in favor of it than the other, and so it's an option that we use quite a bit in the legislature. So being chairman of state and local government and watching that bill closely coming to my committee, felt the need that it to go ahead and draft 447 and get it moving in the legislative process, and grateful that we did that because of what happened to 812 on the House floor actually in rules, and the carve outs ended up killing that bill. So luckily we did do those companion bills, and ended up second to last bill in the Senate getting it agreed to. So
you made that look so easy in the Senate, and it happened fairly early in the session that you got it through. In my mind, it did, and I just thought it was going to be a cakewalk in the House too after that, and that just wasn't the case. And so where we at GRLDC didn't know the significance of what you were doing in the Senate, it turned out that was the only chance we had to get the bill across the finish line.
yeah, you're correct, and yeah, it unfortunately what happened to 812, the House members that had the study committee and worked on that bill in the off season. It was unfortunate to see it get chopped up like that, but us having 447 and getting it across, that was the kind of the juice that helped get it done. But really in the House, it was just that fight from West Georgia, that Paulding County delegation, that had that swath of land that had been zoned about 20 years ago, and they were trying to use the permitting process, unfortunately, like many other municipalities, were using as a weapon to slow developments to get underway. But unfortunately, that creates there's no silver bullet to the affordability issue, as you know, but this is one big piece, and glad that we got it done.
Me too, and thank you again. So we learned that you were taking this on in the Senate, but why did you do that? Why did you think it was important to dive into something on permitting and that type thing? Why did you think it was important?
Jane, thank you for asking me that question. It's been something that's been a priority of mine for this was my sixth session, third term in the legislature, and my background acquisitions, for residential developments has been about 90% of my career, as you and I've spoke about quite a bit in depth, and I've seen the needs, in our industry, and there's many more. This is just one. We've got many other issues, but it's been something that I've been fighting for since I got in the legislature. It's just something like you and I spoke about. When you're dealing with legislation, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you've got to wait sometimes, and you get beat on legislation, but you got to wait until there's a need or the wind shift, in your direction. And because of the affordability crisis that's pushed, home building and, the cost of home building and what the issues are and the red tape and regulation, around it to the legislature and made it a priority. So, we finally gotten to that point where we can get this legislation done. And when I was a freshman, I was one of Governor Kemp's floor leaders during COVID, and we passed legislation then, and I carried it on his behalf. But it dealt with, it had teeth during COVID, but after that, after 2 years, it was an opt out. Dealing with the third party private providers, if they could not perform, and kind of the method behind that was during COVID. You could have a whole department that was out and they couldn't operate for a few weeks, but glad that we got this legislation done and got it, get Governor Kemp to sign it and get it into law and in effect in July.
That is outstanding. And so you saw the need, you saw a strategy, you took leadership in that role, and gave us a what turned into Plan B and ultimately Plan A. Let's just start talking about the bill a little bit. So in the bill, there's three distinct sections. The first section deals with private inspectors. Now, that wasn't something that we put forward from GRLDC, but there was an apparent need there. Can you tell us what you think we'll accomplish with the use of the language in the private inspector section of the bill?
Yeah, so it will help. Those third party private inspectors. They're already approved by the municipality, but if a municipality's overloaded, or if they're having staffing issues, or if they can't perform within the regulations set forth, being able to use that third party gives you that option to kind of continue to move that plat and that project along.
So
It's another tool in the
that
toolbox.
one primarily is with vertical construction, correct?
That's correct.
And so I think I haven't used, I don't think, private inspectors on vertical construction yet. And one thing I was digging into a little bit more was apparently the guys that are using it in the state, that sometimes the municipality is basically redlining these inspection reports based on the content of the inspection rather than just the format. And I think the way the statute was originally designed was the format is all the municipality could review. The content of the inspection was not up for debate. And I think that takes care of that and cleans that up in this bill. So that could be a really good thing, because a lot of the people tuning in today will be home builders. A lot of us were not even aware that using private inspectors was an option. And so I think to tighten that up was a good move, even though, like I said, it wasn't a priority of us on the development side when we started this, but it should really help our customers and those of us that are developers and home builders. So then we also, the meat of it, what we thought was the meat of it, was the shot clock on the development, land disturbance permits. And can you tell us what you think about that, what you were hoping to accomplish, and what you think we did accomplish there?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it definitely is the meat of the bill. Uh, you know, you still have, on your first submittal, they still have the 45 days, but during that 45 days, that's when they've got to completely inspect the plat, come up with their comments and list those comments. And, when the resubmittal comes, there's only a 20-day turnaround for your second uh, resubmittal, but then they cannot add additional comments outside of the original comments that they've made. And that's been a big issue, for all of us in the development world. Like you and I discussed last year, Chafin Communities, they had a plat, 8 rounds of comments. The last round, it was just to bold the font, on the plat, which cost time and several $1,000s, as you know. And so this takes that out. So they've also got to post the requirements that they've got to have within the plat, which includes the font size and, material things like that. So they can't go outside of that box. And, with a good engineer, maybe 2 rounds, 3 rounds tops, and, you should be able to get your final plat. And so, with the teeth in there and all those different measures, it will hold these municipalities accountable.
We ran a survey of builders around the state or developers around the state to find out how long land disturbance permits were taking. The average time right now, and this was among 50 projects, so by no means fully comprehensive, but it was from Savannah, Augusta, Rome, Columbus, and then several municipalities in Metro Atlanta. We found that the average right now is 11 months. And so looking at what you accomplished in Senate Bill 447, we think that number could go down to 75 days from submission. And so what does that mean? You're a businessman, uniquely qualified because you're a developer and a state senator. What do you think that means for the development industry, lot availability, but more importantly, home affordability and availability to Georgia home buyers?
Yeah, I mean, across the board, it means a heck of a lot on all those measures. I tell you, cutting, that time frame down from 11 months to 2.5, which it should be. I mean, when I got in the industry in the early 2000s, at 2 or 3 months, and you would have your plat, and that was your, kind of your projection. So, I mean, in affordability, I mean, you take, the 8.5 months out of it, and especially if you're having to close on it after zoning and not getting, not be able to close on it LDP, there's 8.5 months of interest that not occurring, that would, eventually have to pass on to the home price, ultimately the home buyer. So, I mean, it will massively help home affordability, and then also supply. I mean, as you and I spoke, I believe it was out of the 159 counties, it was 94, 96 counties. There's a shortage of housing, and part of it is is availability of lots. You can't put a house on the ground unless you've got developed lots available. And so moving this along, I think, and our shortage in Georgia, as this gets implemented, I think here in the next year or two, we'll see a big difference.
I think you're right. As you're saying that, one thing that occurs to me is we've watched a deterioration in the local private home builder, and since there's such a scarcity in lots, it's very difficult for that young entrepreneur to compete with the national builders for building lots. And hopefully with more building lots, I think there may be a chance to stimulate that young private home builder again. Do you think that might be a benefit from this?
Absolutely, it will. Yes. I tell you, before the recession, if you remember, I think it was 70 or 80, percent of your home building companies were regional or local home builders, and you only had, 20 or 30% were your nationals, and that is completely flipped to where you get 70 or 80%, maybe more than that,
Wow.
that are your nationals. So I think, yes, this will, having a lot of availability, especially, dealing with, smaller developments, or even your one streeters where you've got 10 or 12 lots or 20 lots that your big guys won't take, but you're able to get those on the ground quicker. It will help those guys as well.
That's a good point, because a small development like that, the big guys won't do them typically, and the small guys with those time frames can't do it because it just takes too long. They can't be exposed that long. Another thing that happens, I don't know, you do a lot of business in Gwinnett, I think, in that area, right? And so when I buy land, I do handle a lot of land acquisitions. A lot of the times I'm dealing with 80-year-old gal who's selling the family farm. She's watched everything around her get developed, and now it's her turn. And what she doesn't understand when we talk to her is, ma'am, it's going to take a year to zone it, and then it's going to take a year to permit it. And so for your 82nd or 83rd birthday, we'll be able to close on this property. And so for those Georgia home landowners, there's not as many of those as there are home buyers, obviously, but that's an important piece too, I think.
Yeah, no, it is. I tell you, and a lot of times when they're getting ready to sell that family farm, that it's been in the family for generations. For whatever reason, they can't either afford it or they've decided to move further out. It's time for them to reap their benefit, like someone selling their house, and this will definitely help move that process along for them as well.
So the third component and the final was a dashboard. And when we were talking about that, and you had that put in Senate Bill 447, I was getting a haircut. You can let's see, I don't have to do that very often, but I was getting a haircut, and on the sign, on a placard right there by the register, there was a thing that showed me where I was in line, and it moved up, and it was, and this haircut cost, mine should cost $11, and it cost about 15. But in any case, even for a small purchase like that, they were able to maintain a live update in the shop. And then if I order a pizza, I can check where I'm at in line on that. If I get a cup of coffee at a shall not be named coffee shop, there's a big sign there that shows me where I'm at in the process there. And these are for things that cost between $4 and $15, $20. And here we're dealing with things that the implications for the home buyers, typically a median price home in Georgia right now is $400,000. We don't have that, but you were able to get that inserted, that now there's a dashboard. What are your expectations for that?
Yeah, it's accountability, transparency, for the local government, and I preach this all the time. I wish that local governments would get back to treating us like customers as we are, and this is just a way to help accommodate their customer, instead of us having to call up there or send emails trying to figure out where our plat is, or having to send someone up there. Just real, every 24 hours it's updated. Where your plat is in the process, comments, if there's something else you've got, an action you need to take, it cuts down on that time. And they're not having to, staff's not having to answer those emails and reply. It's all there on the dashboard. So I think it will help tremendously. As you know, we did get pushback initially. But I mean, with technology today and these municipalities, the websites that they've got and the tracking that they've got, this should be something, very simple for them to integrate. And I think once they do it, I think they will see the benefit on their side as well. I think it will help both sides. And talking about the haircut, I am vice chair of the hair caucus. Senator Albers is the chair, so we'll extend an invitation to you.
Okay.
To come in the hair caucus with us.
Thank you. I'll be an emeritus member. Hey, and to your point on the website, that was why, in consideration for some of the municipalities having to retool a website or something, that was why you allowed them to have until January of 2028 before that had to be implemented, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, to give them the runway to implement and get it established on their system.
Now, the rest of the bill, if it's the governor will sign it between now and I think May 12th, when does it go into effect?
It would go into effect July 1st of this year.
That is outstanding. The people that are listening to this right now are going to be so excited to know that maybe the things they actually have in process can be affected by this. Certainly anything that they submit after July, I might have one that's ready to go in May. I might just wait till July.
I
But
don't blame you.
but that's really outstanding. So we think home buyers will benefit. We think the industry will benefit. We think land sellers will benefit. We think the accountability will help us all. And it won't just be the accountability on the staff, because the bill smartly gives the staff 5 days to tell us if the plans are complete or not. And when we hire engineers, we depend on the engineers to tell us if the plans are complete before they submit them, because they're the experts. And if I could design them, I would do it. But so it raises the accountability and professionalism of our engineers as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, it certainly does. And, like I said, it does hold the engineers accountable as well. I mean, when you've got clear criteria, on the website, what's required on the plat, and then when that issuance, of the comments for resubmittal is laid out there, and then there's no additional comments outside of that window, good engineer that takes their time should be able to answer those comments, I would think, within one round, or, no more than two.
I think you're right. And you mentioned something a moment ago, that if they have any requirements outside of code, like a font size or the way they want a page numbered or where they want the title block or anything like that, or a sequencing of the plan, that has to be clearly spelled out for the engineer to have before he makes his initial submittal. And I think that's going to be very important. And it brings back a level of courtesy and mutual respect between a professional staff and the professional engineers that we hire.
No, I agree. And, having that clear criteria, in municipalities, I mean, it, like you said, it gives them the professional standards where, here's what we require, and it's laid out. Engineer, there's no question about it. And there's no going back. And, it just makes the process much smoother.
So I'm a residential guy. You do residential and commercial development. Does SB 447 affect commercial as well as residential?
Yes, it does. It was not tailored to just residential development. It's for all developments. Your only ceiling to it is if it triggers, any type of review, then it would go from the regional commission. Then it would trigger that. But besides that, residential or commercial would fall under the bill.
On the residential, I think the DRIs are triggered at 420 lots, the last one I had to do. And then I think on commercial is triggered by some level of impervious surface. So some of the organizations were concerned that data centers or industrial parks would take advantage of that, but nothing really changes for those review processes, I don't think.
No, yeah, though I would imagine, projects of that scale, when you're talking, million or millions of square feet of industrial buildings, if it's distribution or data center, that would trigger, that and would pop out of that time frame. So any of those big type projects would certainly not be within the what the bill intends.
That's great. I think this is just so outstanding. Again, those of us in the development community, thank you for your hard work and your perseverance. You mentioned it earlier, and I want everybody to know this thing, the last day of session was what, April 4th?
Yes,
Thursday,
sir.
April 4th. This thing passed at 12:50 a.m. on April 5th, and it was the next to the last bill that passed. And if it did not pass, it would have had to have waited and started, maybe not start from scratch, but start again when you guys meet next January. And so this was so important. Your tenacity and perseverance is so appreciated by the industry, by land sellers, by home buyers. And we want to increase the number of those young home buyers and get that first time age away from 40 years old and back down to where it needs to be. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close about how Senate Bill 447?
No, just grateful for you having me on today. Grateful that we were able to get this piece of legislation across the finish line. I mean, like you said, it's going to help our industry. It's going to help home buyers and municipalities as well. It's going to help them. But just I, I just encourage folks in the industry to reach out to your legislator, whether it's a representative or a senator, the state level. Get to know them. It does help. If you've got an issue, either with in the profession or something else, knowing your representative, your senator, having that direct line is very important. And I always encourage folks to do that, because if you've got a state issue, they can help you, even if it's dealing with an agency or not even legislation. They can connect you very easily. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
That's a great suggestion. Well, Clint, thank you so much, and we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. Take care.
Again, many thanks to Senator Clint Dixon, just a wonderful ally for Georgia home buyers and for those of us in the industry that are trying to serve those Georgia home buyers. If you have questions about Senate Bill 447, please feel free to reach out to me at j@templar, templar-dev.com. I think we'll have it here on the screen, and it's just j@templar-dev.com. I would love to talk to you, get to know you, talk to you about the other plans we have at Georgia Residential Land Development Council. There are a lot of hurdles to clear in an effort to serve more Georgians with more wonderful houses. And I'd be happy to have that discussion with you. So thank you for joining us today. And again, many thanks to Senator Clint Dixon and the Georgia General Assembly for this momentous passage of Senate Bill 447. Thank you.